I still remember the exact shade of blue in the Norfolk sky that morning, a perfect, cloudless expanse that seemed to mock the chaos that was about to unfold. 20 years in the military had taught me to trust my instincts, and something about that perfect sky felt wrong, like the eerie calm before an ambush. Lieutenant Brooks, the commander, wants these reports before the 0900 briefing. Sergeant. Miller handed me a stack of folders, his expression unreadable as always. I nodded, checking my watch. I'll have them on his desk in 15. Naval Station Norfolk hummed with its usual morning activity. Personnel moved with purpose across the grounds, the occasional aircraft roaring overhead. I'd come to love this base over the past decade. It was more home to me than any place I'd ever lived. I made my way to Colonel Ronald Mercer's office, reports tucked under my arm. At 42, I was older than many lieutenants, having enlisted at 19 to escape a life that was going nowhere. The military had given me structure, purpose, and most importantly, a family I never had. Colonel Mercer was at the center of that family, my commanding officer, mentor, and the man who'd saved my life in YA and Kandahar 8 years ago. The memory still flashed through my nightmares. The ambush, the explosion, the darkness, and then his voice cutting through. Hold on, Brooks. That's an order. He'd carried me 3 miles to extraction with a bullet in his own shoulder. I owed him everything. His assistant waved me in without looking up from her computer. He's waiting. Colonel Mercer sat at his desk, ramrod straight despite being in his late 50s. His salt and pepper hair was perfectly trimmed, his uniform impeccable. He looked up as I entered, a hint of a smile crossing his otherwise stern face. Lieutenant Brooks, right on time as usual. The reports you requested, sir. I placed them on his desk. He nodded, leaning back slightly. You'll be attending the strategy briefing this morning. Admiral Harding will be there, and I want him to see the work you've been doing on the new training protocols. My heart skipped. Admiral Harding wasn't just anyone. He was the fast track to promotion, to finally making commander after years of being passed over. Thank you, sir. I appreciate the opportunity. Mercer stood, smoothing his uniform jacket. You've earned it, Brooks. Your loyalty to this unit, to this country, it hasn't gone unnoticed. There was something in his voice, a heaviness I hadn't heard before. Sir, is everything all right? He waved off my concern. Nothing to worry about. Just getting old, I suppose. He checked his watch. We should head to the briefing room. Carol's joining us today. I suppressed a wince. Carol Mercer, the colonel's wife of 30 years, had never bothered to hide her dislike for me. The feeling was mutual, though I'd never let it show. Military discipline had its advantages. The briefing room was already half full when we arrived. I spotted Carol immediately. Designer clothes that screamed money, perfectly styled blonde hair despite being in her 50s, and that practiced smile that never reached her eyes. She was talking to Admiral Harding, her hand resting casually on his arm as she laughed at something he'd said. Natalie. She nodded when she saw me, her smile tightening. Mrs. Mercer? Nice to see you. The lie came easily after years of practice. Colonel Mercer took his place at the front of the room as everyone settled in. I sat near the back, opening my notebook as the lights dimmed for the presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, his voice commanding attention. Today we'll be discussing the implementation of new training protocols for... He stopped mid-sentence, a strange expression crossing his face. Sir? Someone prompted from the front row. The colonel gripped the podium, knuckles whitening. I apologize. As I was saying, that's when it happened. One moment he was standing tall, the next he was collapsing, his body folding in on itself like a marionette with cut strings. Ron! Carol's scream pierced the stunned silence. I was moving before I registered what was happening, military training kicking in. Give him space. Someone call medical. I reached him first, rolling him onto his side as he began to convulse. His eyes were open but unseeing, face ashen gray. Colonel, stay with me, I urged, checking his pulse, rapid and thready. Medical's on the way. Carol pushed through the gathering crowd, dropping to her knees beside her husband. For a moment, all the animosity between us vanished. We were just two people terrified for someone we cared about. What's happening? She demanded, as if I had answers. I don't know. Possibly a seizure. I kept my voice calm, professional, even. As my mind raced through possibilities, none of them good. The medical team arrived with impressive speed, taking over with practiced efficiency. They stabilized him enough for transport, loading him onto a stretcher as Carol clutched his hand. Her perfect composure cracked wide open. I'm going with him, she said. Not a question, but a statement of fact. I nodded, stepping back to give them room. As they wheeled him out, Admiral Harding appeared at my side. Quick thinking, Lieutenant. The Colonel's lucky to have you. I barely registered his words, my eyes fixed on the doorway where they'd taken Mercer. Something cold had settled in my stomach, a premonition maybe, that nothing would ever be the same again. The briefing was abruptly adjourned. People filed out in subdued groups, whispering among themselves. I gathered my things mechanically, my mind elsewhere. My phone rang as I was leaving. My brother, Derek, calling from the auto shop he managed in town. I almost didn't answer, but something told me I needed to hear a familiar voice. Hey, I said, stepping outside into that mockingly perfect blue sky. Nat, you okay? You sound off. I took a deep breath. Colonel Mercer? Just collapsed during a briefing. They've taken him to Eagle Rock Veterans Hospital. Derek knew enough about my history with the Colonel to understand why this hit hard. Shit, that's tough. You want me to pick up Max from school? You probably have a lot going on there. Max, my 9-year-old godson, the light of my life. After his mother, my best friend Jenny, died in service 3 years ago, I stepped in as his guardian. Not officially adopted, but in all the ways that mattered. He was mine. Would you? I should probably head to the hospital, check on the Colonel's condition. No problem. The kid can hang out at the shop. He loves watching the mechanics work. Thanks, Derek. I ended the call, already walking toward my car. I didn't know then that this was the beginning, that Colonel Mercer's collapse would set in motion events that would test my loyalty, my courage, and everything I thought I knew about honor. I couldn't have imagined that within weeks I'd be strapped to an operating table, fighting for control of my own body against the very people I'd sworn to trust. But that perfect blue sky, it knew. And somewhere deep down, I think I did too. 3 days passed before I was allowed to visit Colonel Mercer at Eagle Rock Veterans Hospital. 3 days of rumors sweeping through the base like wildfire. Heart attack, stroke, brain tumor, each theory more grim than the last. I brought flowers, nothing fancy, just a simple arrangement from the base exchange. The hospital corridors were achingly familiar. Too many friends had passed through these halls, some never to return. I found his room at the end of a quiet hallway, the door half open. Come in, Lieutenant. His voice was weaker than I remembered, but the command in it remained. He lay propped against white pillows, skin pale against the hospital gown, an IV line snaking into his arm. Monitors beeped steadily beside him. Carol sat in a chair by the window, scrolling through her phone, barely acknowledging my presence. Sir, I placed the flowers on a side table already crowded with more elaborate arrangements. How are you feeling? Like I've been through a week-long training exercise. He attempted a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Sit down, Brooks. I took the chair opposite Carol, who finally looked up, her gaze coolly assessing. The doctors say I'm lucky you acted so quickly, he continued. Always the reliable one, aren't you? Just did what anyone would do, sir. I shifted uncomfortably under his praise. Carol's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then stood abruptly. I need to take this. Don't tire him out, Lieutenant. She swept from the room in a cloud of expensive perfume. As soon as she was gone, the Colonel's facade crumbled slightly. He leaned back, exhaling slowly. It's worse than they initially thought. A knot formed in my stomach. What do you mean, sir? My kidneys are failing. He stated it flatly, like reporting casualty numbers after a mission. Both of them. Years of hypertension, they say, though I've never had symptoms before. I'm on the transplant list, but with my age and blood type, he trailed off, the implications clear. I'm so sorry, sir. Is there anything I can do? The words felt hollow, inadequate. He looked at me for a long moment, something unreadable in his eyes. Actually, Brooks, there might be. Before he could continue, Carol returned, her phone still in hand. Whatever vulnerability I'd glimpsed in the Colonel vanished instantly. The Admiral sends his regards, she said, resuming her seat. He's arranging for the best specialist to consult on your case. That won't be necessary. The Colonel's voice was tight. Dr. Winters has already explained the options. Carol's perfectly manicured nails tapped against her phone screen. Options? There's only one option, Ron. We find you a donor. The atmosphere in the room shifted, becoming charged in a way I couldn't quite define. I felt suddenly like an intruder in a private conversation. I should probably go, I said, standing. Let you rest, sir. No. Carol's voice stopped me. Stay, Lieutenant. This concerns you too. I sank back into my chair, confused. Ma'am? She looked at her husband. Tell her, Ron. Or shall I? The colonel sighed, a sound so defeated it sent a chill through me. Brooks, we've been looking at potential donors. Family members first, of course. Of course, I echoed, still not understanding. None of us are compatible, Carol continued. Not me, not our son, not Ron's brother. We've tested everyone. I'm sorry to hear that. I glanced between them. But I'm sure the doctors will find a solution. The transplant list would take years. Carol cut in. Years my husband doesn't have. Understanding began to dawn, a slow, cold realization that turned my blood to ice. What exactly are you suggesting, Mrs. Mercer? Uro-negative, the colonel said quietly. Universal donor. We checked your military records. I stared at him, disbelief warring with a growing sense of dread. You want me to donate a kidney? To you? He saved your life in Kandahar. Carol's voice had taken on a silky quality that didn't match the steel in her eyes. Carried you to safety with a bullet in his shoulder. Isn't that right, Lieutenant? I couldn't deny it. The debt was real, hanging between us like a physical thing. Yes, but it's your duty, she continued. He's your commander. You don't get to say no. The colonel at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. Carol, that's not... It's exactly what this, is. Her gaze never left my face. Loyalty above all. Isn't that what you military types preach? Well, here's your chance to prove it. I felt trapped, cornered in a way no battlefield had ever made me feel. This is a lot to process. What's to process? Carol's voice hardened. He needs a kidney. You have two. Simple arithmetic. I have a godson, I said, grasping for solid ground. Max? Depends on me. I need to think about the man who made your career possible, Carol interrupted. Think about where you'd be without his recommendation letters, his mentorship. Her smile was all teeth. Think about what happens to promising officers who suddenly lose their commanding officer's support. The threat hung in the air, unmistakable. The colonel finally spoke up. That's... Enough, Carol. Lieutenant Brooks is right. This is a significant request. She deserves time to consider. I looked at him, the man I'd respected for over a decade, and for the first time, I saw something that made my skin crawl. Not regret for his wife's behavior, but calculation. He was watching me, gauging my reaction, waiting to see how far my loyalty would stretch. I should go, I said again, standing on legs that felt unsteady. I need to pick up Max from school. Of course. The colonel nodded. But Brooks? Don't take too long. Time isn't on our side. I made it to the hallway before I had to lean against the wall, my breathing shallow. What had just happened? Had my commanding officer really implied that my career depended on giving him a body part? Lieutenant Brooks? I turned to find Carol following me, her heels clicking sharply against the linoleum floor. Mrs. Mercer, I really need to... I understand this is a shock, she said, her voice softer now, almost sympathetic. But you need to understand something. Ronald isn't just my husband. He's a decorated war hero, a man who has shaped military strategy for decades. His value to this country far outweighs any temporary discomfort you might experience. Organ donation isn't temporary discomfort, I countered. Her expression hardened again. You're a soldier, Lieutenant. Sacrifice is in your job description. She pressed something into my hand, a business card. Dr. Winters wants to see you tomorrow for preliminary tests. 9 a.m. Don't be late. She walked away without waiting for a response, leaving me holding the card like it might bite me. My phone vibrated in my pocket. A text from Derek. Max wants to know if we can get pizza tonight. You in? The normalcy of the message nearly brought tears to my eyes. I texted back a quick affirmative, then headed for the parking lot, my mind spinning. As I drove away from Eagle Rock, the hospital growing smaller in my rearview mirror, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just been drafted into a different kind of war, one where the battle lines and rules of engagement were terrifyingly unclear. What I didn't know then was that Carol Mercer had already set her plan in motion long before today's conversation. She'd been preparing this battlefield for weeks, moving pieces into position with the precision of a military strategist. And I, Lieutenant Natalie Brooks, decorated combat veteran and survivor of some of the world's most dangerous war zones, had just become her primary target. The next morning dawned gray and drizzly, matching my mood perfectly. I stood in my kitchen, coffee untouched, staring at Dr. Winter's business card. The clock on the microwave read 7:32. I had less than 90 minutes to decide whether to show up for those preliminary tests. You look like you're planning a tactical strike on that coffee mug, Derek said, appearing in the doorway. At 38, my younger brother was the opposite of military precision. His dark hair perpetually tousled, t-shirt wrinkled, but his eyes sharp and observant. Something like that. I slid the business card across the counter to him. He read it, eyebrows rising. Transplant specialist? What's this about? I filled him in on the hospital visit, Carol's pressure, the colonel's calculating gaze. Derek's expression darkened with each detail. That's fucked up, Nat. They can't force you to donate an organ. Technically, no. I ran a hand through my hair, still damp from the shower. But Carol made it pretty clear what happens if I refuse. Your career. Derek's voice was flat. So it's blackmail. It's complicated. No, it's not. It's... Grandma! Max burst into the kitchen, all 9-year-old energy and gap-toothed grin. He wasn't my biological grandson, of course, but he'd started calling me that after his mother died and the name stuck. Can you help me with my science project today? It's about the solar system. I forced a smile, ruffling his sandy blonde hair. Maybe later, buddy. I've got an appointment this morning. At the base? His eyes lit up. He loved visiting Naval Station Norfolk, proudly wearing the visitor badge, saluting everyone in uniform. No, at the hospital. His smile faltered. Are you sick? Just a checkup, I assured him. Derek will take you to school, okay? After they left, I sat alone in the kitchen. Carol Mercer's voice echoing in my head. It's your duty, Lieutenant. You don't get to say no. 20 years in the military had taught me about duty, about sacrifice. But this felt different, twisted somehow. Still, the colonel had saved my life. Did I owe him mine in return? At 8:45, I found myself walking into Eagle Rock Veterans Hospital, as if on autopilot. The receptionist directed me to the fourth floor, nephrology and transplant services. Dr. Winters was waiting for me, a tall woman with prematurely silver hair and kind eyes that seemed at odds with her brisk manner. Lieutenant Brooks, thank you for coming. She led me to an office rather than an exam room, which surprised me. Please, sit down. I perched on the edge of the chair across from her desk. I should clarify, Doctor. I'm, here to get information, not necessarily to agree to anything. Something flickered in her eyes. Relief? I understand. And I appreciate your honesty. She opened a file in front of her. Colonel Mercer's condition is serious, but not immediately life-threatening. With dialysis, he could survive for years while waiting for a compatible deceased donor. That's not how Mrs. Mercer described it. Dr. Winters pressed her lips together. Mrs. Mercer is understandably concerned for her husband, but as the physician in charge, I'm obligated to give you the full picture. She leaned forward. Living donation is a serious commitment. There are risks, recovery time, potential long-term complications. I understand that. Do you? Her gaze was penetrating. Lieutenant, in my experience, military. Personnel sometimes have a skewed perspective on acceptable risk. This isn't a battlefield decision. This would permanently alter your life. I shifted uncomfortably. The colonel saved my life once. So I've heard. Multiple times from Mrs. Mercer. Dr. Winters' tone was dry. But medical ethics don't operate on a debt system. Donation must be freely given, without coercion. I'm not being coerced, I said automatically, the lie bitter on my tongue. Dr. Winters looked skeptical, but didn't challenge me. Well, if you're considering this, we need to determine compatibility first. Blood tests, tissue typing, health assessment. And if I'm not compatible, then the question becomes moot. I nodded, clinging to that slim hope. All right, let's do the tests. The next few hours blurred. Together, blood drawn, forms filled out, questions answered about my medical history. By noon, I was exhausted, sitting in a small waiting area when a familiar click of heels announced Carol Mercer's arrival. Lieutenant. She sat beside me, immaculate in a navy suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. I'm glad you made the right decision. I haven't decided anything yet, I countered. These are just preliminary tests. She waved dismissively. A formality. Dr. Winters already confirmed you're a likely match based on your blood type and medical records. Something cold settled in my stomach. You've discussed my medical records with Dr. Winters? Carol's smile didn't reach her eyes. Ronald's the priority patient here. Of course, we've explored all options thoroughly. The violation of privacy stunned me, though I shouldn't have been surprised. Carol Mercer operated by her own rules. Has it occurred to you, I said carefully, that I might have reasons not to donate? Family responsibilities? Your godson? She raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. Max would be fine. Children are resilient. She patted my hand, her touch as cold as her gaze. Besides, kidney donation has a very high success rate. You'll be back on your feet in no time. If I decide to do it. Her patting stopped abruptly. Lieutenant Brooks, let me be perfectly clear. My husband saved your life. He mentored you when no one else would take a chance on a rough-edged enlistee with no college education. Everything you've achieved, your rank, your reputation, the comfortable life you provide for that child, you owe to Ronald Mercer. Her voice lowered. Gratitude isn't optional. It's a debt. The words hit like physical blows because they held kernels of truth. The colonel had championed me when others hadn't. He'd seen potential where others saw only a scrappy kid from nowhere. But a kidney? Before I could respond, Dr. Winters approached with a tablet in hand. Lieutenant Brooks, we have your preliminary results. Would you prefer to discuss them privately? Carol stood. That won't be necessary. I'm family liaison for all of Ronald's medical matters. Dr. Winters glanced at me, clearly uncomfortable. I nodded, too drained to argue. Well, initial blood work shows you're a potential match. We'll need further testing for complete tissue typing, but it's promising. Carol's smile was triumphant. Excellent news. How soon can we schedule the surgery? Mrs. Mercer, Dr. Winters said firmly, there are many steps between compatibility testing and actual donation, psychological evaluation, ethics committee review, more detailed medical workup, all of which can be expedited, I'm sure. Carol's tone made it clear this wasn't a request. Dr. Winters turned to me. Lieutenant, I'd like to schedule you for a consultation with our transplant psychologist. Standard procedure for all potential donors. Of course, I managed, feeling increasingly trapped. Wonderful, Carol said, as if the matter was settled. I'll have my assistant coordinate with the colonel's schedule. He'll be so relieved to hear the good news. As she walked away, Dr. Winters gave me a long look. Lieutenant, I want to emphasize that you can withdraw from this process at any stage. Your medical information remains confidential, and your decision is yours alone to make. But we both knew that wasn't entirely true. Not with Carol Mercer involved. I left the hospital feeling like I'd stepped into quicksand, each movement pulling me deeper into a situation I couldn't control. In the parking lot, my phone rang. Admiral Harding's office. Lieutenant Brooks, his assistant said crisply, the Admiral would like to see you tomorrow at 0900 hours. May I ask what this is regarding? He didn't specify, but he mentioned it was a positive development regarding your career trajectory. I ended the call, a sinking feeling in my chest. The timing couldn't be coincidental. Carol Mercer was moving her pieces across the board, and I was being surrounded from all sides. Admiral Harding's office was as imposing as the man himself, spacious, meticulously arranged, with a view of the Norfolk harbor that few military personnel ever got to enjoy. I stood at attention, my uniform pressed to perfection, while he reviewed something on his computer screen. At ease, Lieutenant Brooks. He gestured to a chair across from his desk. Sit down. I complied, spine still rigid. Admiral James Harding was legendary in naval circles, brilliant strategist, decorated commander, and known for his unflinching standards. His endorsement could make a career. His disapproval could end one. I've been reviewing your service record. He turned the screen toward me, showing my personnel file. Exemplary. Multiple commendations, consistent superior performance evaluations. He leaned back. You've been passed over for commander twice now, correct? Yes, sir. A shame. Particularly for someone with your experience and skill set. He tapped a pen against his desk. I understand you're considering donating a kidney to Colonel Mercer. The abrupt change of subject caught me off guard. I'm undergoing compatibility testing, sir. No decisions have been made. Noble gesture. His eyes, sharp as a hawk's, assessed me. Very much in line with your character, according to those who know you. I remained silent, unsure where this was heading. I've authorized a special commendation for your personnel file, he continued, for exceptional dedication to duty and sacrifice beyond required service. He slid a document across the desk. This will be entered into your record next week. I glanced at the paper, an official commendation that would significantly strengthen my next promotion review. The timing was unmistakable. Thank you, sir, I said carefully, but I haven't actually done anything yet. Consider it an incentive. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Colonel Mercer has been a valuable asset to this command for decades. His continued service is a priority. The implication hung in the air, impossible to miss. My career advancement was being tied directly to my willingness to donate. Sir, with all due respect, I'm still considering my options. This is a major medical decision. Of course. He stood, signaling the end of our meeting. I trust you'll make the right choice, Lieutenant, for the good of the service and your own future. I left his office with the commendation in hand, feeling soiled by what it represented. In the hallway, I nearly collided with Captain Rivera, the base legal officer. Sorry, sir, I apologized, stepping aside. Lieutenant Brooks. He studied me for a moment. Everything all right? You look troubled. I hesitated. Captain Rivera had a reputation for integrity, for doing what was right regardless of political consequences, but confiding in him would mean acknowledging the pressure being applied, making real what I'd been trying to dismiss as paranoia. Just a lot on my mind, sir. He nodded, unconvinced. My door's always open if you need legal counsel, Lieutenant, for any reason. I thanked him and continued toward the exit, his offer lingering in my mind. Legal counsel. Was that what this situation required? Back at my office, I tried to focus on routine reports, but my thoughts kept circling back to the Admiral's thinly veiled bribe. My phone buzzed with a text from the hospital. My next round of tests was scheduled for tomorrow morning. Everything was moving too fast. At school pickup, Max bounded into my car with his usual enthusiasm, backpack clutched to his chest. Grandma, I got an A on my space quiz. He thrust a paper at me, planets carefully colored and labeled in his messy handwriting. That's fantastic, buddy. I smiled, the first genuine one all day. Can we go to the Science Museum this weekend? Mrs. Peterson says they have a real astronaut suit you can try on. We'll see. I navigated through after-school traffic. I might have some appointments. More hospital stuff? His voice turned serious. Are you sure you're not sick? Kids. They picked up on everything. I'm not sick, Max. Just helping someone who is. Like when you gave blood after the hurricane? If only it were that simple. Something like that. At home, Derek was waiting, leaning against his battered pickup truck. One look at my face, and he knew. That bad, huh? Worse, I admitted once Max was inside, headphones on, immersed in his video game. I showed Derek the Admiral's commendation. He swore under his breath. They're not even being subtle about it. It gets better. My medical records were apparently an open book before I even agreed to testing. Derek paced the driveway, tension radiating from him. This is beyond pressure, Nat. It's extortion. What choice do I have? If I refuse, my career is over. 20 years down the drain. And if you agree, what then? You give up a kidney because you're blackmailed into it? How do you live with that? I had no answer. The military had been my life, my identity, my purpose, my community. Walking away would mean losing everything I'd built. There's something else, Derek said, lowering his voice. I did some digging on Carol Mercer. What kind of digging? The kind that involves calling in favors from friends in interesting places. My brother had contacts from his less-than-legal youth, connections he rarely tapped these days. She's been meeting with people from Westlake Pharmaceuticals regularly. So, she probably has investments. Not just any people. Research scientists, clinical trial coordinators. He pulled out his phone, showing me photos. Carol entering a restaurant, sitting with men in suits. This was taken 2 days before the colonel collapsed. What are you suggesting? I don't know exactly. But something doesn't add up. A military officer's wife doesn't typically have lunch with pharmaceutical researchers unless there's an agenda. I wanted to dismiss his suspicions as paranoia, but after the events of the past few days, I couldn't. There were too many red flags, too many corners being cut. I need more information, I said finally. Be careful, Nat. Derek's expression was grim. These people are playing for keeps. If they're willing to pressure you this openly, what else are they capable of? His question followed me into the house, into the evening routine of dinner and homework help, into the quiet moments after Max went to bed. What else were they capable of? And how far would they go to get what they wanted? As I sat on my back porch that night, the stars hidden by Norfolk's perpetual cloud cover, I made a decision. I would continue with the testing, continue playing along, but I would also start my own investigation. If Carol Mercer was using me as a pawn in some larger game, I needed to know what it was. The military had taught me many things. Chief among them, know your enemy before engaging in battle. The war had begun. I just hadn't realized I was already a casualty. 2 weeks passed in a blur of medical tests and meetings. My body was poked, scanned, and analyzed until I felt more like a specimen than a person. Every result confirmed what Carol already knew. I was an ideal match for the colonel. Each confirmation tightened the noose around my neck. Meanwhile, the pressure from above intensified. Admiral Harding, coincidentally, appeared at functions I attended, always making a point to mention the colonel's condition and my noble sacrifice. My commanding officers suddenly found reasons to praise my work in public settings, with pointed references to the kind of loyalty that defines a true officer. I played along, smiling through gritted teeth, while Derek continued his quiet investigation into Carol Mercer and Westlake Pharmaceuticals. "I've got something," he told me one evening after Max had gone to bed. He opened his laptop on my kitchen counter, showing me a series of documents. Westlake has been developing a new immunosuppressant drug, something that would prevent rejection after transplants. That's hardly suspicious. Pharmaceutical companies develop drugs all the time. The suspicious part is their testing timeline. Derek pointed to a paragraph highlighted in yellow. They've been trying to get FDA approval for 3 years, but keep getting rejected due to insufficient clinical data. I skimmed the document, trying to make sense of the medical jargon. What does this have to do with me? I found a connection between Carol Mercer and Dr. James Whitman, Westlake's head of research. They've known each other since college. She was pre-med before dropping out to marry the colonel. A chill ran through me. You think she's helping Westlake somehow? Derek's expression was grim. I think she's orchestrating an unofficial clinical trial, with you and the colonel as the test subjects. The accusation was so outlandish I almost laughed. That's crazy. The military hospital wouldn't allow experimental drugs. Not officially, Derek agreed. But what if they didn't know? What if the colonel's regular medication was supplemented somehow? And after the transplant, what if your follow-up care included certain standard anti-rejection protocols? The cold feeling in my stomach intensified. It sounded paranoid, but after weeks of manipulation and ethical corner-cutting, I couldn't dismiss it entirely. I need proof, I said finally. Real proof, not just connections and theories. Max might have already found some. My head snapped up. What? How is Max involved in this? Derek looked uncomfortable. He's been spending time at the Mercer's house after school twice a week. What? I stood furious. Since when? Why wasn't I told about this? Carol arranged it through the school's mentorship program. She told them Max showed scientific promise and could benefit from working with the colonel's home healthcare team. They started that science club program he's been talking about. My mind raced back to Max's excited chatter about his special science club that met at the cool house with the big lab in the basement. I'd assumed it was a school program, never imagining it was at the Mercer's home. Jesus, Derek, they've been using my kid to get to me? It gets worse. Max was playing with Carol's tablet yesterday. She gave it to him with some educational game. But he's a curious kid, and you know how tech-savvy he is. I nodded, dread building. He found some videos, conference calls between Carol and some doctors. He didn't understand what they were saying, but it scared him enough that he recorded part of it with his school Chromebook. Where is he now? In his, room, pretending to sleep. He's afraid you'll be mad at him for snooping. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the protective rage building inside me. I need to see that video. Max was sitting up in bed when I entered, clutching his stuffed dog to his chest. His sandy hair was tousled, eyes wide with worry. Am I in trouble? He asked in a small voice. I sat beside him, pulling him into a hug. No, buddy, not at all. Uncle Derek told me you found something on Mrs. Mercer's tablet, something that worried you. He nodded against my shoulder. She was talking about you, and the colonel, and some medicine with a really long name. Can you show me the video you took? He reached under his pillow, pulling out his school Chromebook. I didn't mean to spy. She just left it open when she went to answer the phone, and I saw your name. You did exactly right, I assured him, taking the laptop. The video was short and shaky, clearly filmed by a child trying to be discreet, but the audio was clear enough. Once we get the transplant, we'll publish the results, Carol's voice said. The immunosuppressants will appear FDA approved through this trial. No red tape, just money. A male. Voice responded, and the donor? This Lieutenant Brooks? She's agreed? Carol's laugh was cold. She's the perfect donor. Loyal to a fault. Military types are so predictable. Wave the flag of duty in their faces and they'll march straight off a cliff. The video ended as footsteps approached, Max clearly having hidden the device just in time. I stared at the black screen, a strange calm settling over me. It wasn't paranoia. It wasn't my imagination. Carol Mercer was using me, using my loyalty, my sense of duty. to advance some pharmaceutical scheme. Is it bad? Max asked, watching my face anxiously. Are they going to hurt you? I hugged him tightly. No, they're not, because you just helped me figure out what's really going on. You're my hero. You know that? He beamed, relief flooding his features. So you don't have to give your kidney away? Not if I can help it. I tucked him back into bed. Get some sleep, okay? Everything's going to be fine. In the hallway, I found Derek waiting, his expression questioning. You were right, I said quietly. It's some kind of pharmaceutical trial. They're using me and the colonel as test subjects. What are you going to do? I checked my phone. A message from Dr. Winters had arrived while I was with Max. Final compatibility confirmed. Surgery scheduled for next Wednesday. 6 days away. I'm going to fight back, I said. But carefully. If Carol Mercer is willing to manipulate medical procedures for profit, there's no telling what else she might do. Derek nodded, understanding the unspoken concern. Max's safety had to be our priority. I'll take him to stay with Mom for a few days, he suggested. Tell them he's got a school break or something. Our mother lived 2 hours away in Virginia Beach, far enough to be safe from whatever fallout might come. Good idea. And I need to talk to Dr. Winters. She seemed uncomfortable with how this was being handled. Maybe she'll help. Be careful, Nat. These people have, connections. I squeezed his arm. 20 years in combat zones, remember? I know how to handle myself. But as I lay awake that night, planning my next move, I wondered if any of my military training had prepared me for this kind of battle. One fought not with weapons, but with medical records and secret videos, where the enemy wore designer clothes and hospital scrubs instead of enemy uniforms. The video had confirmed one thing. Carol Mercer saw me as nothing more than a means to an end, a convenient source of fresh organs and clinical data. The question was, did Colonel Mercer know? Was he a victim in this scheme or a willing participant? Either way, I had less than a week to unravel the truth before I found myself on that operating table, donating more than just a kidney to their cause. The morning of my scheduled pre-surgical consultation, I arrived at Eagle Rock Veterans Hospital an hour early. The building was quieter at 7 a.m., the bustling daytime staff not yet fully deployed. Perfect for what I needed to do. I found Dr. Winters in her office, already reviewing charts despite the early hour. She looked up in surprise when I knocked on her open door. Lieutenant Brooks, you're not scheduled until 8. I know. I closed the door behind me. I need to talk to you, privately. Something in my tone must have alerted her. She set down her tablet, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. What's this about? I sat down, leaning forward. I need to know something, Doctor. Off the record. Is there anything unusual about Colonel Mercer's treatment plan? Anything experimental? Her professional mask slipped for just a moment, enough to confirm my suspicions before she recovered. I'm not sure what you're referring to. The Colonel is receiving standard care for renal failure, including medications from Westlake Pharmaceuticals, drugs that aren't FDA approved yet. Dr. Winters went very still. Who told you that? Does it matter? Is it true? She rubbed her temples, suddenly looking exhausted. Lieutenant, you have to understand my position. I'm bound by confidentiality and medical ethics, I interrupted, including informed consent for experimental treatments. I pulled out my phone, playing Max's video. As Carol Mercer's voice filled the small office, no red tape, just money. Dr. Winters' face drained of color. I had no idea, she whispered when the video ended. I knew Mrs. Mercer was pushing for an aggressive treatment schedule, but this, she shook her head. This explains the unusual medication protocols she's been insisting on. I questioned them, but she had approval documentation. Forged? Possibly. Dr. Winters looked genuinely distressed. The Colonel's condition is legitimately serious, but there have been inconsistencies in his test results, fluctuations that didn't make medical sense. A terrible suspicion formed in my mind. Could someone be making his condition worse, deliberately? Dr. Winters hesitated, then nodded slowly. Certain medications, if misused, could accelerate kidney deterioration. It would be unethical, dangerous, but possible. Yes, possible. The implications were staggering. Was Carol Mercer actually harming her husband to advance this pharmaceutical scheme? Or was he a willing participant, enduring temporary suffering for potential profit? I need access to his complete medical records, I said, and I want my surgery canceled. I can help with the latter, Dr. Winters said immediately. Medical ethics require that donation be completely voluntary. If you're withdrawing consent, that's the end of it. Relief flooded through me. And the records? That's more complicated. Patient confidentiality? Doctor, they're using me as an unwitting test subject. They're exploiting my military loyalty to manipulate me into a potentially dangerous procedure. And they're involving my 9-year-old godson in their scheme. That last point seemed to decide her. She typed something into her computer, then turned the screen toward me. I can give you 15 minutes. If anyone asks, you never saw this. I scanned the colonel's records quickly, focusing on the medication lists and lab results. Most meant nothing to me, but I took photos with my phone, documenting everything I could. There, Dr. Winters pointed to a notation. Experimental protocol, UL 472. That's not a standard treatment. And here, she scrolled down, test results submitted directly by Dr. Whitman, not through our lab. James Whitman? From Westlake Pharmaceuticals? She nodded. He's listed as a consulting physician, which isn't unusual for complex cases, but bypassing hospital protocols for testing? That's highly irregular. I'd seen enough. Thank you, Dr. Winters. I appreciate the risk you're taking. I became a doctor to help people, Lieutenant, not to be complicit in unethical experimentation. She straightened her lab coat. I'll mark your surgery as canceled by donor request in the system. But you should know, this won't end here. Mrs. Mercer has significant influence at this hospital. I'm counting on it, I said grimly. Outside, I called Derek. I've got confirmation. Experimental drugs, manipulated test results, the works. Dr. Winters is helping me cancel the surgery. Thank God, he breathed. What now? Now I confront the colonel. I need to know if he's involved or just another victim. Is that safe? I checked my watch. He'll be alone this morning. Carol has that charity luncheon she mentioned to Max. Something about supporting military families. The irony wasn't lost on me. Be careful, Nat. Mom's expecting Max tonight. I'll pick him up from school and drive him down. Perfect. I'll call you after I talk to Mercer. The colonel's home was an imposing colonial in one of Norfolk's most exclusive neighborhoods. The kind of place a military salary alone couldn't possibly support. A nurse let me in after I showed my military ID, explaining that the colonel was having a good morning and could receive visitors briefly. I found him in a sunroom at the back of the house, surprisingly alert, reading reports in a leather armchair. For someone supposedly at death's door, he looked remarkably composed. Lieutenant Brooks. He seemed genuinely pleased to see me. This is unexpected. I thought we should talk, sir. About the transplant. Ah. He set aside his papers. Carol mentioned there might be some last-minute jitters. Perfectly normal, I assure you. I remained standing, keeping my distance. It's more than jitters, sir. I've discovered some concerning information about your treatment plan. About Westlake Pharmaceuticals. The change in his expression was subtle, but unmistakable. A tightening around the eyes. A slight straightening of his posture. Not surprise. Recognition. I'm not sure what you're talking about, Lieutenant. I think you are, sir. WL 472. The experimental immunosuppressant that hasn't received FDA approval. The one that would be tested on both of us after the transplant. For a long moment, he said nothing, just studied me with the calculating gaze I'd glimpsed in the hospital room. Weeks ago. Who have you spoken to about this? He finally asked. That's not important. What matters is whether you knew, whether you're a willing participant in this scheme or a victim of it. He laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. A victim? Is that what you think? He gestured to the luxurious surroundings. Do you think a colonel's pension pays for all this? For Carol's lifestyle? For the connections that have advanced both our careers? The confirmation hit me like a physical blow. So you knew about everything. Not initially, he admitted. Carol arranged it with Whitman. By the time I understood the full scope, I was already receiving the treatments. He shrugged. The accelerated kidney deterioration was unexpected, but manageable. A temporary setback for a significant, long-term gain. Gain? I echoed, disgusted. You were willing to risk my health, to manipulate my loyalty, for money? Not just money, Brooks. Influence, security. The kind of retirement most military personnel can only dream of. His eyes narrowed. You owe me your life. One kidney seemed a small repayment. In that moment, the man I'd respected for decades, the officer I'd trusted with my life, disappeared, replaced by a stranger whose moral compass had been corrupted beyond recognition. I canceled the surgery, I said flatly. And I have evidence of what you and Carol have been doing. The experimental drugs, the falsified approvals, all of it. For the first time, a flicker of concern crossed his face. Evidence? What evidence? Enough to end both your careers. Enough for criminal charges. He leaned forward, his voice hardening. Think carefully about your next move, Lieutenant. This isn't just about you and me. Your career, your future, your ability to provide for that boy you've taken in, all of it depends on the goodwill of people like me. The threat was clear, but instead of fear, I felt a strange sense of liberation. The bonds of misplaced loyalty that had held me for weeks were finally broken. Goodbye, sir, I said, turning to leave. I suggest you prepare for the fallout. His voice stopped me at the door. Brooks, you go public with this and I'll make sure you never serve another day in uniform. Is that really what you want? To throw away 20 years of service? I looked back at him, this man who had saved my life once and now thought it gave him ownership of me. What I want, Colonel, is to be able to look at myself in the mirror, something you might want to try someday. As I walked out of his house for the last time, my phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Winters. Mrs. M just arrived at hospital, furious about surgery cancellation, demanding to speak to medical director. Tread carefully. The confrontation with Carol would come soon. Enough. But first I needed to secure the evidence and ensure Max's safety. The real battle was just beginning, and this time I was fighting not just for my body, but for my soul. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of strategic maneuvers. Derek successfully brought Max to our mother's house in Virginia Beach, away from whatever storm was brewing. I collected and organized all our evidence. Max's video, the medical records I'd photographed, statements from Dr. Winters about the irregular protocols. I encrypted everything and stored copies in multiple secure locations. Carol's fury at the canceled surgery manifested in a barrage of calls and texts, each more threatening than the last. When those went unanswered, she escalated to my commanding officers. By the following morning, I was summoned to Admiral Harding's office. Lieutenant Brooks. His tone was glacial as I stood at attention before his desk. Would you care to explain why you've withdrawn from the kidney donation procedure? Medical concerns, sir. I kept my response deliberately vague. Colonel Mercer saved your life. The Admiral leaned forward. This is a matter of honor, of duty. With respect. Sir, I interrupted. Something I'd never done before in his presence. Donating an organ is not a military obligation. It's a personal medical decision. His eyes narrowed. Your timing is concerning, Lieutenant. This could be interpreted as reluctance to serve. My service record speaks for itself, sir. Records can be reinterpreted, evaluations revisited. The threat hung in the air between us. Carol Mercer is understandably distressed. She believes you're abandoning her husband after giving your word. I took a calculated risk. Is Mrs. Mercer aware that experimental drugs from Westlake Pharmaceuticals are being used in the Colonel's treatment? Drugs that haven't received FDA approval? The Admiral's expression shifted, surprise quickly masked by professional neutrality. I don't know what you're talking about. I believe you do, sir. And I believe others would be interested to know about it too. The Inspector General, for instance. Or the Medical Ethics Board. For a moment, silence filled the office. Then Admiral Harding sat back, reassessing me with new wariness. Tread carefully, Brooks. Accusations like that require evidence. Which I have, sir, securely stored. Another long silence. Then, what exactly do you want, Lieutenant? I want to be left alone to make my own medical decisions. I want my career to continue based on my merits, not political pressure. And I want the exploitation of military loyalty for pharmaceutical profit to stop. He studied me, calculating odds and outcomes like the strategist he was. I'll need to look into these allegations. I thought you might, sir. I've prepared a brief summary. I placed a sealed envelope on his desk, just enough to indicate the scope of what I've documented. As he opened it and skimmed the contents, his face hardened. This is concerning, if accurate. Every word, sir. Every document. The Admiral set the papers down carefully. I'll need 24 hours. Of course, sir. And in the meantime, I expect all pressure regarding the donation to cease. He nodded curtly, dismissing me with a wave. Outside his office, I exhaled slowly. Phase 1 complete. I'd planted the seeds of doubt, given the Admiral a chance to distance himself from whatever Carol and the Colonel had been orchestrating. Now came the harder part, confronting Carol directly. I didn't have to wait long. That afternoon, as I was leaving the base, she was waiting by my car, elegant as always in a tailored suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Lieutenant, Her smile was glacial. We need to talk. I don't think we do, Mrs. Mercer. I've made my decision. Because of some misguided suspicions? She stepped closer. Whatever you think you know, you don't have the full picture. I have. Enough of it. WL472, Westlake Pharmaceuticals, Dr. Whitman, accelerated kidney deterioration. I watched her flinch at each point. Your husband confirmed everything. That caught her off guard. Ron wouldn't. He did. Quite proudly, actually. Called it a temporary setback for a significant long-term gain. Color drained from her face, replaced quickly by calculating anger. What do you want? Money? A promotion? I want you to leave me alone. And I want you to stop using my godson in your schemes. Her eyebrows rose. Max? He's just a child. Who you've been manipulating to get to me. The science club at your house? Giving him access to your tablet where he accidentally might see certain information? For the first time, uncertainty flickered in her eyes. That's absurd. Is it? He recorded one of your video conferences, Carol, about using me and the Colonel as test subjects for your unapproved drug. She went very still. You're bluffing. I pulled out my phone, played 5 seconds of the video, just enough for her to hear her own voice. She's the perfect donor, loyal to a fault. Carol lunged for the phone, but I was faster, sliding it back into my pocket. That's just a copy. The original is secure, along with all the other evidence I've collected. What are you going to do with it? Her voice was controlled, but I could see the calculations behind her eyes. That depends on you. Walk away. From me, from Max, from using military personnel as unwitting test subjects. And it stays private. Continue. And it goes to every authority with jurisdiction. You'd destroy, Ron's career? After everything he's done for you? He destroyed it himself when he decided to profit from exploiting soldiers' loyalty. I met her gaze steadily. And speaking of loyalty, I've already briefed Admiral Harding on the situation. He's reconsidering his position. The mention of Harding hit her hard. She'd been counting on his support, his pressure. Without it, her leverage crumbled. This isn't over, she hissed. Actually, it is. Because tomorrow, Dr. Winters is bringing her concerns about the Colonel's treatment to the Hospital Ethics Committee, and I'll be there to testify. Pure fury flashed across her face. You ungrateful little— Goodbye, Mrs. Mercer. I unlocked my car. I suggest you use the next 24 hours wisely. Lawyers, damage control, whatever you need. As I drove away, watching her shrinking figure in my rearview mirror, a weight lifted from my shoulders. The confrontation I'd dreaded for weeks was over. I'd stood my ground, protected myself and Max, without sacrificing my integrity. But I knew better than to celebrate too soon. Carol Mercer wouldn't surrender without one final, desperate strike. That night, as I packed overnight bags for myself and Max, preparing for whatever might come next, my phone rang. The hospital. Lieutenant Brooks? It was Dr. Winters, her voice urgent. You need to come in, right now. What's happened? The Colonel's been admitted with severe complications, and he's asking for you. Is this another manipulation? No, she said firmly. This is legitimate. His condition has deteriorated dramatically in the past few hours. I think— She hesitated. I think someone may have tampered with his medication. My blood ran cold. Carol? I don't know. But he's lucid and he says he needs to speak with you, that it's vital. I thought of all the reasons to refuse. The manipulation, the threats, the violated trust. But 20 years of military service had ingrained certain principles too, deeply to ignore. I'll be there in 20 minutes. As I grabbed my keys, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking into an ambush. But if the Colonel was truly dying, if he wanted to make amends or confess or simply say goodbye to someone who had once respected him deeply, could I really refuse? What I didn't realize was that the operation about to unfold wasn't medical. It was the final, desperate gambit in a war I hadn't fully understood until now. Eagle Rock Veterans Hospital was unnaturally quiet when I arrived, the night shift moving with hushed efficiency through dimly lit corridors. Dr. Winters met me at the entrance to the ICU, her face drawn with fatigue and worry. He's stable for now, she said, leading me toward a private room at the end of the hall. But his system is shutting down. Whatever was administered, and I'm almost certain something was, it's aggressive. Carol? Dr. Winters' expression tightened. She was here earlier. Left about an hour ago, said she needed to make calls. Is he lucid? Surprisingly so. That's why I'm concerned this isn't just medical deterioration, it's targeted. She stopped outside his door. I've ordered comprehensive toxicology, but those results won't come back for hours. I nodded, steeling myself. How much time does he have? If this continues, maybe until morning. The colonel looked diminished against the white hospital sheets, his once commanding presence reduced to a pale shadow connected to monitors and IV lines. But his eyes were clear when they found mine, clear and strangely calm. Lieutenant Brooks. His voice was weaker, but steady. You came. You asked for me, sir. I remained standing at the foot of his bed, maintaining distance. Not sure I deserved that courtesy. He attempted a smile that came out as a grimace. Given recent events, I said nothing, waiting. The nurses say I'm dying. He gestured weakly at the machines surrounding him. Accelerated kidney failure? Liver complications? Systemic collapse? Another attempt at a smile. Faster than even Carol's timeline accounted for. You think she did this to you? His laugh was a hollow rasp. Who else? I became a liability when you refused to cooperate. Too many loose ends. Despite everything, I felt a flicker of pity. Your own wife. The ultimate betrayal, isn't it? He shifted slightly, wincing. Poetic justice, perhaps. I betrayed everything I claimed to stand for. Honor, duty, loyalty. Used those principles to manipulate others while violating them myself. Why tell me this now? Because you deserve the truth, and because I need your help. He reached for a small digital recorder on the bedside table, holding it up with trembling fingers. I've made a complete statement. Everything. The arrangement with Westlake, Carol's involvement, the experimental drugs, the planned testing on you, all of it. I stared at the recorder, stunned by this unexpected turn. Take it, he urged. Use it however you see fit. Protect yourself. Protect others from being used the way we tried to use you. Cautiously, I took the device, slipping it into my pocket. Why now, sir? After everything you've done? Because dying has a way of clarifying things, Lieutenant. His gaze held mine. I was wrong. Not just about the Westlake scheme, about everything. Using loyalty as a weapon. Treating your life debt as currency I could spend. For a moment, the man I had once respected seemed to resurface. The commander with integrity. The officer who understood honor as more than a convenient fiction. I saved your life in Kandahar, he continued softly. Not because I expected repayment, but because that's what soldiers do for each other. Somewhere along the way, I forgot that. A monitor beeped, his vital signs fluctuating momentarily before stabilizing. Dr. Winters stepped in, checking readings, adjusting medication. You should rest, she told him, casting a meaningful glance my way. He shook his head. Not yet. There's more. He waited until she left before continuing. Carol's desperate now. She knows you have evidence. She knows the Admiral is wavering. She can't hurt me, I said with more confidence than I felt. Don't underestimate her. She has one more card to play. His breathing grew more labored. Max? Ice flooded my veins. What about Max? He's safe with my mother. Is he? Have you confirmed? That recently? I pulled out my phone, trying to mask my growing panic as I texted Derek. Is Max still with Mom? Confirm immediately. The colonel watched me, regret etching deeper lines in his ashen face. I'm sorry, Brooks. I never meant for it to go this far. I let ambition and greed corrupt everything. My oath, my honor, even my ability to see what Carol had become. My phone buzzed with Derek's reply. Yes, just spoke to Mom. They're watching movies. Why? Relief washed through me, followed quickly by suspicion. If this is another manipulation, it's not. The colonel's voice grew fainter. But be vigilant. Carol won't stop until she's neutralized the threat you represent. Another monitor alarm sounded, more urgent this time. Dr. Winters rushed in with 2 nurses moving me aside as they worked to stabilize him. Lieutenant, you should wait outside, she instructed, adjusting IV flow rates. In the hallway, I examined the recorder, confirming it contained nearly 30 minutes of the colonel's confession. I copied the file to my secure cloud storage immediately, then slipped the device back into my pocket. An hour passed before Dr. Winters emerged, exhaustion evident in her slumped shoulders. He's stabilized, but it's temporary. His systems are failing. Will he regain consciousness? Unlikely. She hesitated. We found traces of something unusual in his preliminary blood work, not consistent with his prescribed medications. I've called in a toxicology specialist. Carol, I said softly. The police have been notified. They'll want to speak with you. I nodded, the recorder a heavy weight in my pocket. I'll be ready. Morning came with a flurry of activity. Police investigators interviewed hospital staff. Military police arrived, Admiral Harding having finally connected enough dots to involve proper authorities. Carol Mercer was nowhere to be found, her house empty, her phones unanswered. The colonel died at 6:42 a.m., never regaining consciousness. By noon, the full scope of what had been planned became clear. Carol had indeed been working with Westlake Pharmaceuticals to bypass FDA approval processes, using military personnel as unwitting test subjects. The colonel had been a willing participant initially, lured by financial promises, until the accelerated kidney failure proved more serious than anticipated. She needed your kidney to save him, Dr. Winters explained as we reviewed findings with investigators. But more importantly, she needed you both as test subjects for the new drug. A military officer and his loyal subordinate, perfect candidates for controlled observation. And when I refused, the colonel became a liability. Too many questions, too many potential leaks. The investigation expanded rapidly. Westlake Pharmaceuticals' stock plummeted as news broke. Dr. Whitman was taken into custody. Admiral Harding, seeking to distance himself from the scandal, became surprisingly cooperative, providing records of all communications with Carol regarding my duty to donate. Carol herself remained missing for 3 days. When authorities finally located her at a private airstrip attempting to board a chartered flight to the Cayman Islands, she had with her documentation of similar schemes involving other military personnel, leverage for potential deals with prosecutors. She never got the chance to use it. The charges were too numerous, the evidence too damning. The colonel's recorded confession sealed her fate. 1 month later, I sat in Captain Rivera's office, still processing the aftermath. The Navy appreciates your cooperation, Lieutenant. He closed the file on his desk. Your actions exposed a significant breach of ethics and potentially saved other service members from exploitation. Thank you, sir. I hesitated. And my position? Secure. In fact, the promotion board has reconvened. Your commander's insignia should be official next week. I should have felt triumph, vindication. Instead, I felt a complicated grief for the mentor I'd lost long before his death, for the system that had allowed such corruption, for the innocence shattered. Lieutenant, Captain Rivera studied me. Something else on your mind? Just processing, sir. It's been a lot. He nodded in understanding. Loyalty is a cornerstone of military service, but it should never be weaponized against those who serve. Later that evening, I sat on my back porch with Derek and Max, watching the sunset paint Norfolk's sky in shades of amber and gold. Max was building an elaborate Lego spaceship, his recent trauma fading into childhood resilience. So, Commander Brooks, Derek said, handing me a beer. What's next? I watched Max for a moment, this child who had inadvertently helped expose a conspiracy by simply being curious and brave. I'm requesting a transfer to the training command. Less deployment, more stable hours. For Max? For both of us. I took a long drink. The military gave me structure when I needed it, purpose when I had none. But loyalty isn't about blind obedience, it's about standing up for what's right, even when it costs you. Pretty good lesson for him to learn. Max looked up, sensing he was being discussed. Grandma, can we have pizza tonight? To celebrate your new commander job? I smiled, ruffling his hair. Absolutely, buddy. You earned it. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I reflected on everything that had happened. The manipulation, the threats, the betrayal. The colonel had saved my life once, only to later try to claim ownership of it. Carol had nearly succeeded in using my sense of duty against me. The system I dedicated my life to had almost failed me completely. But in the end, truth had emerged. Not through vengeance or retaliation, but through quiet resistance, through holding fast to principles when it would have been easier to surrender them. Hey, Max, I called as he raced inside to get the pizza menu. You know what I learned from all this? He turned, curious. What? That real loyalty isn't about what you owe someone else. It's about staying true to what you know is right. He considered this with the solemn wisdom only children can muster. Like when Tommy wanted me to let him copy my math test, but I said no because it was wrong. I laughed, genuinely and freely for the first time in months. Exactly. Like that. Some battles are fought with weapons, others with words and principles. I had survived both kinds. And in this victory, quiet, dignified, rooted in integrity rather than revenge, I had found a peace that no rank or commendation could ever provide. True honor, I realized, isn't defined by who you obey. It's defined by what you refuse to surrender.